Lord kind of changed my plans as He often does. And I'm going to preach a little and we're going to pray a little. I'm going to preach a little and pray a little. Now, Pat, I don't know how that's going to work with videotaping. You can do whatever you feel led to do, okay? And I really appreciate how Pat every week faithfully takes care of this and makes sure that we broadcast these messages, and it's a great thing. I want you to look in your Bibles with me, please, at 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9. Hate to admit this, but Chronicles is one of those books I just don't read very much. But there's a wealth there. There is so much treasure there that we often miss. 2 Chronicles 16:9, and I think that you'll probably be familiar with at least the first part of this verse. I think you've probably heard it before. Let me read this to you. It says, "For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward Him," or whose heart is completely His. Now, usually we stop the verse there. That's the fun part. That God is looking for people to seek His face. If I was going to title my message today, it would be God's been looking for you. He's looking for you. But there's more to this verse. It's kind of the downer side of this verse that we need to go ahead and read. It says this: "You have done foolishly in this, for from now on you will have wars." Wow, that's a bummer. Do you see the seer prophet was saying to Asa, "You really messed it up, buddy. God has rescued you from the Ethiopian invasion of over 1 million men. And he just decimated them on your behalf because you trusted Him. And then, when you get into a little more trouble, instead of coming to God again, you go over to the king of Assyria and ask for his help. You've gone to the wrong place for help, and because you've done this, you're going to be at war for the rest of your life." And that last part of the verse struck me as how many of us are fighting needless battles today. You see, Asa could have lived his rest of his life in peace. But because he chose a different way of dealing with his problems, he found himself at war for the rest of his life. And I want to tell you today that I believe many of us today are fighting needless battles today. Why? Because we're going to the wrong place for help. That's right. And when I go to the wrong place for help, I'm going to end up fighting fights I normally wouldn't have to fight. I'm going to end up facing issues that I wouldn't normally have to face. You know, a lot of people, whenever they have problems, the first thing they say is, a lot of church people say, "Well, it must have been God's will." I wonder how many of the struggles you go through when you stand before God in eternity, you and I are going to discover that we're not His will. Everything that happens is not the will of God. God is able to work out His will through that process, and ultimately He will arrive at His will. But there are struggles that you and I go through. It's not because it's the will of God. It was because it was your will.
That's right.
Your will got in the way of God's will. My will gets in the way of God's will. And so what happens is I end up dealing with stuff that God never intended. Now the wonderful news is, isn't His grace amazing? That even when I make all those mistakes, He's able to kind of push me through and kind of keep working it out and say, "You know what? You really blew it this time, Driscoll. But we're going to get through it anyway. We're going to go, but it's going to be tough, so get ready, buckle up." But we're going to get through. And here's the thing, is I feel like many of us are fighting battles we don't need to fight because we're going to the wrong place for help.
That's right.
Now I want to share with you this first thing. In this verse it says, "The eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth." You know, when I thought about that, I thought, God is not sitting on His throne, fanning Himself, waiting for you to seek Him. Isn't it wonderful to know that we have a God who is actually out looking for you? He's got on his deer hunter orange, and he is out in the woods trying to find... I figure this is the second day of deer season. I might say that. But you know, He is out looking for you. He's walking through the forest of your life, trying to get in touch with you. And God is calling for people to seek His face. And Jesus was talking to a woman one time, talking to this woman beside a well. who had spent her life trying to find love in all the wrong places. She was drawing from the well of physical water, but she didn't understand there was another well that God wanted her to draw from. And she was spending her whole life doing this thing. And Jesus comes up to her and says, you know what? God, there's going to come a day when you're not going to worship on this mountain or in Jerusalem, because God is looking for worshipers who will worship Him in spirit and truth. Now, what He's saying to her is, lady, God's been looking for you. You're the one I've been looking for. God is looking for people who want to seek His face. He's looking for people who want to seek His face. He's searching for anyone who will turn their eyes to Him and say, God, you're my hope. I trust in you. And you might say, well, I go to church, I believe in God. That's not the same as seeking His face. You can sit in church all your life and never seek God even once. Because what happens is we go through the motions of religious practice. We come to church, we do our thing, we try to behave, but beyond that, we really don't go after and say, God, what is your will for my life? God, what are you doing? What do you want from me? Right. God, how do you want to use me? What is my responsibility in our relationship? God, what are you calling for me? That's seeking the face of God. And so here's what happens is, let me just ask you this question, then we're going to enter into a prayer time. And here's the question I want you to spend some time asking. We're going to play some music, and I'm just going to let you have a few minutes just to seek God. And here is a question I want to challenge you to ask. And that is this. You realize that what you seek help from is your God. When you're at the end of your rope, where do you run for help? Really. Now don't tell me what you think you ought to be doing. Where do you really run? You know what? If it's that drink at the end of the day that gets you through, that's your God. If it's that little extra cash that's finally going to make your life complete, that's your God. Not that we don't need extra cash sometimes, but sometimes we treat it like it's our hope. It's the thing that's going to make it. If it's that new boyfriend or new girlfriend that someday, if I ever get in that relationship, I'll finally be happy because somebody loves me. That's your God. Don't tell me what you say you believe. Watch what you're doing. Watch what you're running after, and that's where your God is. And that really challenged me. Tim Keller is an apologist, and he talks a lot about this, and he says an idol is anything that gives ultimate meaning to your life. That really stuck me. He said if there's the one thing in your life that if you absolutely lost it, you could not go on, that's an idol. Now, there are lots of things in my life, if I lost them, that would be devastating. But I could go on. If I lost my family as deeply as I love them, it would be hard, it would be devastating to me, but I could go on somehow. If it was my ministry, if I lost my ministry, my ability to preach the gospel, I love to preach the gospel. That would be difficult for me, but I could go on. You know why? Because those aren't my gods. They're passions for me. They're joy in my life. But my God is the one who sits in heaven. My God is the one who sent His Son to earth and died on a cross and shed His sinless blood, rose from the dead on the third day, and is coming back someday. That's my God. Now, if something ever happens to Him, buddy, I'm in trouble. I'm giving up. But anything short of that, you can have it, God. You can have it. If it breaks my heart. And that's the thing, is an idol will always break your heart. You know that? Anything less than God is always going to fall short. So ultimately, it's going to fail you. It can be a good thing and still be a God. It can still be an idol. So what is that one thing in your life? So I want us to search our hearts. And I just want to ask us to spend some time asking this question. God, what am I trusting in? I'm going to stop now. And I'm going to invite you just to spend some time with God. However you want to do that. You can get on your knees. You can get up and walk around. You can sit quietly where you are. You can pray out loud. You can pray silently. Whatever God leads you to do, and you just spend some time listening, seeking His face. God, what am I trusting in?